Kia ora e te whānau. Welcome to the New Zealand Institute of Building and the Industry Insights webinar. Now, we have got for you today two wonderful experts around innovation, which is good because Industry Insights are about being interactive, being international, and being inverted. This is where we ask the questions up front just to keep you entertained. So brought to you, as I said before, by the New Zealand Institute of Building, and our two wonderful experts today are Daiman Otto and Lisa Oliver. Sorry, I'll just go back for that. I'm going to let Daiman introduce himself. He has got a really interesting title, being a hands-on expert in design and construction transformation. And then we'll ask Lisa to introduce herself as Project Director at Homes, ANZ. Daiman, welcome.
Thank you, Pam. Gee, that's photo is interesting. Yeah, my role as an independent consultant, focusing on mass timber construction, as well as innovation, prefabrication, offsite manufacturing, etc. So yeah, that's what I do. I currently have a number of clients in New Zealand and Australia working in that space, and so it keeps me very busy. And also just joined the offsite manufacturing working group under the Construction Sector Accord to look at some work there as well. So yeah, across lots of different domains.
Nice. And I'll just provide a little bit of background too. I used to lead an entity called Prefab NZ, now known as Offsite NZ. Daiman was the Prefab NZ board chair for a period, and we have done a few international excursions. So it'll be really great to hear more about your most recent one. And Lisa, please introduce yourself.
Kia ora. Thanks for having us on, Pam. I'm looking forward to our conversation. So yeah, I'm a project director at Homes and also the sustainability lead across Homes in Australia and New Zealand. And for those who aren't familiar with Homes, we're a New Zealand founded engineering consulting firm. We offer structural, fire and infrastructure engineering services, and we're located all over New Zealand, as well as some parts of Australia, the US and the Netherlands. I've been a structural engineer for around 17 years. And so I've worked on all sorts of projects of all different sizes and scales over that time. I started my career with Homes in Auckland, and with some kind of project highlights being the Motat Aviation Display Hall, which was my first timber project, and the Viaduct Event Centre. But when the Canterbury earthquakes happened, I quickly moved down to Christchurch. So I've got quite a number of assessment and strengthening projects on my CV. But I also have spent a couple of years with the Homes team over in the Netherlands, which was really interesting, experiencing European culture and seeing some of the impressive stuff they're doing in timber over there. Fast forward to now, and I'm back in Christchurch, and a big part of my role is championing sustainability within Homes. I'm also Vice President of the New Zealand Timber Design Society and involved with the Structural Engineering Society through their Sustainable Design Task Force. I think we've got a huge opportunity as an industry to embrace sustainability. So I'm always keen to explore innovations that might help with this. And I'm really passionate about mass timber. And so jumping on this tour was the perfect combination of both of those interests. And so, yeah, and it was well worth it.
Awesome. It's great to see you again, Lisa. And I know we've been lucky to do some work together in the early stages of the Timber Design Centre. Cool. So welcome. So, folks, I understand you've both been some recently lucky people to head offshore on a study tour. Daiman, can you please give us a bit of context about what exactly the tour planning or itinerary involved, and perhaps a little bit of the driver behind why you led this?
Yeah, so I had spent COVID times working for a company called Lendlease out of Sydney, a Sydney-based global construction development investment company. And I was working there in Lend-Lease Digital, and as part of that, there was a few of us, probably about 60 people or so, working on basically bringing digital transformation to construction. And my role there was as a product designer and strategist for how do we make effectively kit of parts approaches to buildings, particularly in response to Lend-Lease's joint venture arrangement or company with Google out in Silicon Valley. And so I'd spent the last almost 3 years working in the California context, primarily looking at how we do mass timber buildings at scale for Google throughout the Silicon Valley area. And as a part of that, I got to work with Homes, actually. Homes is San Francisco office and Home Solutions, as well as a bunch of companies in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco area. And so in about October last year or so, I sort of had a bit of an inspiration that I would like to go back to the area, but also bring a whole lot of people with me so we could see what innovation looks like in basically the heart of global innovation with respect to digital in Silicon Valley. And yeah, and then so it just became an effort by myself at the time to kind of push and pull the idea. So push it to some people I had met or companies I met in Silicon Valley, and then pull other people who might be interested in going. And so shortly thereafter, once I found there was quite a lot of interest, I managed to go to a Homes event actually in Auckland, and had a chat to Hamish Neville and a few others, and I said, hey, you know, let's there's something here, there's interest in going back, and it would be great to sort of maybe partner with Homes to kind of to basically be able to facilitate the event, because obviously with Homes having a San Francisco presence has access to the people and the projects that would be a fantastic idea.
So how did you land on the visits? Can you just mention the companies you visited and why they were chosen or singled out?
Well, I think so. The principle of the tour was the idea that California and New Zealand have a lot of similarities, even on if on the surface it doesn't look like that. Then once you have an experience in the area, you do see there's a lot of similarities there.
Do you mean from a construction context or a seismic context, or
lots of different things? So similar kind of climate, similar seismic context, although I'm not my background as an architecture, not engineering like Lisa, so I'll defer to her expertise. Similar construction methodologies, so lots of timber being used, and that also started to provide some prescriptive compliance pathways for mass timber buildings, which is really interesting because we don't have that in New Zealand at all. So the idea there is if you're a client in the States, you're able to basically follow a prescriptive pathway for mass timber. And so you had this kind of burgeoning explosion of people in that space. And so what I wanted to do really was to look at a broad view of construction and innovation, not just mass timber. We did obviously look at some mass timber projects, and we bookended the entire event by going out to Portland for the Mass Timber Conference. But I wanted to look at off-site manufacturing, a variety of different types. I wanted to look at robotics. I wanted to look at some projects, and we had to look at some phenomenal projects. And also to then experience a little bit of life and culture in the area as well. So so the itinerary really was starting with people I knew, and then also I was able to contact a few people there who put me on to other companies. So Alice Lung from Brick and Mortar Adventures, she was phenomenal in putting me in touch with people like Vive, and so we're able to kind of just through pushing and asking and kind of being a bit cheeky, being able to put together a really, really good itinerary. And it was a great time of year, like I say, bookended by that conference in Portland.
Great. And I've got a list of some of the places here. There's Integra, which I know is a panel producer, Simpson Strong Tie, which is obviously connectors, BBC, which is of course volumetric building, happens to be owned by Vaughan Buckley, which works with his acronym. You've got Silicon Bay projects like Vive, you mentioned before, Dematic, Apple. California being the home of tech, and I think the acronym that I've heard you use before, Daiman, is FANG. Can you tell us what does FANG stand for?
Yeah, these are the big tech companies. So it's Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, as a kind of the main parties in the area. But of course, you've got other people there like Cisco and many others, Airbnb, et cetera. So it really is it's an interesting place, because from a kind of a visual perspective, it's a pretty ordinary place, really. Outside of San Francisco proper, you're talking, 30 to 60 kilometers south is where Silicon Valley is. So it's a pretty ordinary place, pretty suburban, pretty domestic. But you have this kind of like complete clash with like these massive tech giants down there. So a really interesting place to be.
Awesome. And Lisa, I know that whenever you go on tour, it's as much about the people on tour as it is about the projects. Can you explain to me who you were on tour with and what type of role diversity were interested in seeing these innovation construction highlights in North America?
Yeah, sure. We had a really good group of Kiwis join us. We had quite a few from with a contracting background, so a few from Naylor Love and LT McGuinness. We had some architects there, Jazz Max, Warren and Rani, context architecture represented. We had some QSs, RLB were there. We had the client perspective with precinct properties and some suppliers. Who am I missing, Daiman? It was a really good mix.
Yeah, we had Hector Egger there from a offsite manufacturing perspective. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, and makers of architecture in that sort of space too. So we had some big and some small firms represented, and from Homes being kind of the co-hosts with Daiman, there was myself and Hamish from New Zealand, and then over in the US we were joined by Eric McDonald from our structures practice in the US, and he is our sort of director of mass timber, and Bevan Jones, who's one of the directors of the fire practice, and then Harriet Ingham, who is from the home solutions team. So we had that nice balance of some local US people on the tour bus with us that were able to give us that kind of inside insight from a US perspective.
Great. And Lisa, just sticking with you for a moment here, can you give us your top three kind of takeaways or learnings, given that we know your context is an interest in mass timber and sustainability and engineering? It would be really great to hear about your highlights and how they might be applied locally.
Okay, some highlights. As Daiman said, there are lots of similarities between New Zealand and California, and that's one of the reasons Homes is actually there. We started our offices over there in 2000, was when we first went to San Francisco, and since then we've expanded to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland and Seattle. And so those offices have got a real connection with New Zealand. We've got New Zealanders working in them. And so we see quite frequently how, those parallels and similarities are between the countries. And so it was really good just to see that in person and share it with some of the other Kiwis with us. Like we went and visited a few of the offices, and I think they were quite surprised that, I don't know, they still had the Homes feel and were quite relatable. So that was, a personal highlight for me, I guess, getting to connect with the Homes team. In the US, you can't help but notice that everything is just a bit bigger. Bigger cars, bigger meals. The size of the conference was bigger, but also the budgets that they're working with are bigger.
How does that translate to the construction project? Literally the size of the project, the size of the budget, and their ability to do more innovation, or where did you see that?
Yeah, I think so. The companies we visited, quite a few of them had some pretty big seed funding numbers behind them, and we came away from a few of them going, how, one, I guess, where's the business case in a few cases? You just couldn't get that off the ground, or you don't see the same kind of seed funding in New Zealand to get initiatives like this off the ground. So that was just an interesting comparison.
Is that in relation to a particular company that's a startup?
Yeah, so there was one urban machine company we visited where they were developing robots to take nails out of pieces of reclaimed timber. So a really great sustainability story there, reusing timber, the idea was that they would put these robots on the back of a truck, you drive it to your site. As the material was taken off the building, it would go through the machine, all the nails would be removed by this robot, and then you've got the clean timber to on sell and use in the next project. So they're talking about these big solid pieces of sort of historical timber that are pretty valuable and prized. But I guess the capital piece of it is that it takes a lot to develop a robot and all that kit to do that that task, which it's not like there's not a solution for that now. There's manual labor can do the same job, but there's a lot of capital, and they've spent already a year or two developing that system with no return yet.
So I'm hearing there's learnings around innovation and application of technology, but without the ingredient of the suitably sized investment, it's going to be difficult to transfer locally.
Yeah, but it also doesn't mean that, they're doing the work for us in some instances, and we can just
development work, yeah.
Take the learnings, make sure we're open to.
So if you could pick up just one of the technologies or systems that you saw, which one would that be for you, Lisa? And then Daiman, I'll ask you the same question.
Oh, it is a really challenging question because we saw so many diverse things. And there is no one company that had the answer and was the be all and end all to bring back. I think it was more, there were pieces of process or outcomes from the different visits that we could learn from and bring back here, but there was no one company that had a breakthrough technology that could be directly applied.
Can you tell us about one of those processes that stuck with you?
Maybe this is going back to the scale thing, but with the VBC visit, the volumetric company, it was an ex-Katera factory, so it was huge, and it was set up on I think they call it a fishbone system, where you've got a main line with ribs coming off it, and so on a rib you've got the floor panel of the module being built, and then that goes onto the main line, moves along, and you've got a wall panel being built that comes along and gets fixed to it, and you go down adding pieces from the branches until you've got to the end and you've got a completed 3D completely finished module. So seeing the scale and the technology and clever processes in those was really cool, and like it would be awesome to see something like that here, but then do we have the scale to actually demand an output from it that warrants that level? So then it's more like, how do you take pieces of that and scale it down to something that is appropriate for New Zealand.
Or slightly smaller fish. I think
Yeah.
we can relate. That's a really good, strong visual. Daiman, do you have a similar visual that stuck in your mind that was a highlight?
Well, I think, and I don't know, again, it's pretty stormy right now, so hopefully doesn't come through the mic too much. The biggest learning I've had over the last 5-6 years, particularly the last couple of years, has been the power of the product development discipline to buildings. And so, and that's why I think we wanted to go and see a wide variety of buildings, because what you're seeing there is actually not people making buildings, you're seeing people making products, and process is a critical part of that. And the biggest change, personally, I feel that we can make in the built environment sector is to start basically adopting a product development approach. And really, it's pretty simple. It's kind of understanding understanding and uncovering client pain points, and then figuring out a solution to meet those pain points using evidence. And so, like going back to Lisa's example, Urban Machine, yes, they were removing screws and nails as part of that process, but over time they were adding more features. So, for example, they were adding X-rays so they'll be able to actually then structurally grade the timber. So that's the big problem now, is like, yeah, you can use old timber, but what's its durability? What does it look like as a stick of timber? So they're able to add that kind of feature on board, because they understand that to basically create a market, they need to have a product there that can be trusted. So I think it was cool, because the purpose of the trip wasn't to go and say to California and say, oh, haven't these guys got everything sorted out and we should be emulating them. It's more about, what does innovation look like in practice, and what can we learn? And also understanding that actually we do some fantastic things here as well. And it wasn't about the idea that everything was perfect over there. So everyone is trying different kind of things. So we went from sublime to the ridiculous. So we went from the flagship Silicon Valley Microsoft office, which is just unbelievable. And then the next thing we were doing was standing on a corner in San Mateo in a garage, having some beers, from a really scrappy little startup, looking at effectively the idea that electronics and housing can be rethought, because you don't need mains power running everywhere now. You just need mains power to your stove and that kind of thing. But the entire rest of your building can be run through low voltage electricity, which interestingly puts it in a place, in a regulatory place, which means it's plug and play. You can do it yourself. It's DIY and it's safe, and does 90% of your electrical requirements. So you just had this kind of contrast between lots of different kind of approaches. But the common thing was always about, what problem are we trying to solve, and what is the process we're using to solve that problem, and what's the market, who's the client, all that kind of stuff. Yeah,
I really love that product development approach. It's a design thinking, customer-centric, agile approach, isn't it? Which is who are we serving, what's the problem to solve, what has to be true in order to get there. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense in its application in an R&D sense or problem-solving sense in construction. Look, I'm just going to ask you one last thing before we move into the robotics automation slide. Lisa, I'm interested also in lowlights and disappointments. What kind of surprising thing did you learn on the trip that perhaps shone a better light on New Zealand? Or, I guess when you travel, it's not always looking like the website, the reality, right? So what did you take away?
That is true. You have to go beyond the flashy imagery, because all these companies had some very fancy websites with some very inspirational catchphrases. Along those lines, it was really interesting too. Every time we got back on the bus, some people would be like, "That was amazing! Did you see that? That ceiling, that system is. We should do that everywhere." And someone else would be like, "Are you joking? Like, it's got this wrong with it, this wrong with it, this, it's never going to fly. They're never going to make any money off it." So we got having that diverse group of people from different parts of the industry was really great. One of the things that did stand out to me, I guess, as a bit of a surprise or a low light, was when I think about offsite manufacture, whether it's panelized or volumetric, I think of one of the drivers being an improvement in the quality of the final product. And I don't think we really saw that over there. And I think that's possibly also because in the US, one of their drivers for the offsite manufacturer is being able to use unskilled labor. And it meant that, and they also had really high turnover on the labor they were using. Just the way that employment law and things works over there, it felt like they were really using people who had never done, never held a hammer before. And we definitely saw that in some of the product, the end product. We were a bit disappointed. We thought that you'd get a better product in New Zealand.
Yeah, it's very union driven, isn't it, in this case? Daiman, what about you? Was there any surprising, disappointing aspects that you learned?
I think probably that because and this is my complete generalization, so please excuse it, but the idea is that still the client is always right. And that's a good thing, but what we found is that there was no kind of real baselining of sustainability and things like carbon in their product. So, they would basically, if someone's shipping to Texas or to wherever, the sustainability of their product was dictated by local jurisdiction. If there's no sustainability required, they're not going to do anything. So there's, at the same time you're making claims around the benefits of the product, you're not also baselining, okay, and by the way, our product has these characteristics no matter what happens. We have this these carbon criteria or this other kind of criteria. It's not in all cases, but I found that in New Zealand, I think sustainability is much more in the air here. But when you're dealing with a jurisdiction like the US, where there's many different states, many different cities, many different approaches, it's obviously harder to dictate or harder to create a product that suits all those different variables. To a similar extent, it's often talked about in Australia as well. Different states, federal government, I guess being a small country with one government, we're able to kind of have a lot more consistency over those kind of things that might not necessarily get added in as a kind of a product fundamental.
Okay, so I think I'm hearing some gratitude for our New Zealand Building Code and all its wonderful, translations or interpretations. But we'll take that as a win for New Zealand.
I wouldn't go that far, Pam, but
I guess as North America does scale, Europe does sustainability, right? So if you were really going to look at precedents, that would be perhaps a future trip, which might be a topic we get to in a minute. Daiman, I will come back to you in terms of what you saw around robotics and automation. What did you see there that could be something we learn from, or perhaps watch more closely to see where it evolves?
Yeah, I think we saw a couple of pure robotics companies. One was Urban Machine, which we talked about, which is effectively removing labor from tricky tasks and getting the robot to go and do things that were more difficult for a person to do, and even to find hidden issues. So that was interesting. The next one was a company called Canvas, and Canvas they do human or augmented plastering, really. So they have a human who operates a robot off a standard robot base that then goes and does plastering and of walls. And again, you're moving beyond the Boston Dynamics kind of space in which you're seeing kind of analogs of people doing tasks. Both these companies were using robotics primarily to reduce labor content, and again, in the context of, as we said before, a highly unionized workforce. These companies had pretty smart ways to use robotics to augment labor or to remove tedious labor from jobs that would otherwise be done by a person. There's a couple of other companies that I would have liked to go and see, but just ran out of time. There's Dusty Robotics. Go and have a look at Dusty. They basically, it's a mobile printer robot that prints the floor plan on a floor plate, so you're able to know where all things are going. So there's, again, no one's quite solved it, but they've got different approaches to using robotics, primarily to remove or reduce labor or remove tedious tasks and
improve safety, I'd say.
improve safety. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Right.
So it was really good, and still very early days.
Yep. And what about for you, Lisa? Highlights in that robotics automation space?
I think rather than a highlight, I think it was what we picked up on was there was a general mood that the time is now for robotics, like the climate crisis, the labour shortage, the cost of construction, and the fact that the construction industry in terms of productivity has just been flatlining, where all these other industries are becoming more productive. There was this real sentiment and drive that now's the time, the appetite's there for all these reasons to introduce more automation and robotics, but also exactly what Daiman said, it wasn't to replace or completely remove the need for humans, it's to augment what we're doing and take away some of those less desirable skills and speed things up. So with the canvas, finishing of plasterboard walls, not only were they removing some of that manual labour, but the time it took was a lot quicker in terms of compared to a traditional plastering job where you have to do a coat, let it dry, sand it, do another coat, let it dry, sand it, do another coat, let it dry, sand it. They were kind of able to do that all in one.
That's a really positive way to look at automation and robotics, isn't it? Because often we think of replacement, but actually the only thing we're wanting to replace is the repetition, the unsafe, the unproductive. So it is a replacement strategy, but not of human beings in entirety, just of the less desirable roles.
Yeah. And just making us all more productive.
Yeah. Lisa, while we're on you, and I know you're a mass timber fiend, and tell us about something you saw either on the tour or the Portland Mass Timber Conference that coincided afterwards. What stood out for you?
Well, going and looking at real projects for me was a highlight. And so on the tour piece, we've got to visit two homes projects, one that was under construction that our fire team have been working on, and it was the Google Java campus. So I think it's 90,000 square metre development, so reasonably big, over 3 buildings that were of different construction types. And being Google, it's a real kind of what we were introduced to the term of jewel box construction. So done as a signature, timber used as a signature piece, used to, show off the aesthetic of it and for the sort of almost token sustainability box.
So are we talking exposed structure, or what type of elements would we see at the Java campus?
Exposed structure. So there were 3 different buildings. One was an event space, just single level, but with a really intricate exposed roof structure. One was a kind of gym, employee recreation building. Again, just 2 levels, I think. Again, lots of exposed sort of tree-like structure in that. And then there was the main office building, which was post and beam construction, but again with those columns, beams and floor soffits all exposed. So lots of exposed timber. That was multi-story, that one.
Great.
But yeah, pushing the limits of what timber could do, because they've got those big Google budgets. And it was kind of similar with the Microsoft campus that we visited. Again, lots of exposed mass timber, but another jewel box kind of signature piece of architecture. Whereas when we got up to Portland, we were able to see a few more projects, which I'd like to describe as the smart timber projects, the ones where timber's not being used just to kind of show off, but because it actually makes sense in terms of speed of construction, lowering the embodied carbon. They're actually making those efficiencies and designing just a smart structure. And those ones too were of a scale that, you know, you could imagine back here in New Zealand, so sort of mid-scale commercial buildings. And one of the buildings we visited was the Thesis project, which is another homes one that's under construction. And it just lots of engineering input with the working with the architectural team early on, so that, you know, the grid spacing is determined by the span of the floor, and then, you know, everything sort of flows out from there, so you're getting the most efficient use of the structure, and it's all been thought through so that it comes together fast on site, you know, lots of
Great. Okay. Hey, I might ask Daiman a question that's just come through on Slido, and excuse me for not having mentioned this earlier, but for the good folks watching this, you can interact via the Slido app, and the code is on the screen there, 21 53 16 0. Hey, Daiman, someone's asked if we think New Zealand has the ability to reach the same level California or the states are at with mass timber construction. The assumption here, of course, is that they're ahead of us. Is that something you want to comment on?
Oh, look, I'd say, and again, defer to Lisa on this one too, but I wouldn't say they're ahead of us at all. There's probably more examples of, as Lisa was just saying, more examples of kind of just timber construction in general practice, rather than as a, you know, we in New Zealand, what we've done really well is a lot of piloting exercises. And I think what the US has done is they've moved from piloting to exploring the use of the timber and systems and structure in more general buildings, and that's supported by an acceptable pathway for compliance. So it means it takes some of the uncertainty away. You've still got very similar problems with regards to massive demand, not enough supply, and still, you know, going to the Portland conference, the conversations I was overhearing tells me that the audience was still very much on a learning pathway, whereas I think here we're probably it's probably just far more known about.
Nice. And Daiman, you might remember this, at Prefab NZ, we had a board member, Michael Cambridge, who was a very big timber proponent and part of the First Living building, the Tuhoe and Jasmax. And one of the things he would always reinforce to us is how interior timber had the ability to lower heart rates, which I really loved. The idea that timber's more calming, and it's great to see it picked up in Canada in healthcare facilities, aged care, places where I imagine a lower heart rate is useful, perhaps stressful. But on the interior environments or built environments, Daiman, you saw some things over there in terms of those FANG businesses, Microsoft campus. Can you tell us what trends you're seeing in the States in that built environment space?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things to say about that area. And with these FANG businesses, they are in intense competition with each other for talent. So everything you've heard about the employee experience at these companies is true. They get free food, they get massages, they get amazing environments to work in, they get obviously very good pay. But they're also part of the reason they do that because they're intense competition. And so the only company that actually charges their employees for meals is Apple, and Apple are down in Cupertino, so they're a bit down on the down further. But post COVID, all of the tech companies obviously went into a work from home strategy, and that led in turn to lots of people leaving the state. So lots of people left California, but we're still working. And now with the drive to get people back in the office, it really is incredibly important about the building quality. So Microsoft was a campus that actually Megan Stringer showed us around, another homes person. She was out here recently, showed us around, and they were that building was managed by JLL, and they have the highest occupancy rate of any of the FANG businesses in that one building. And arguably, it's down to the quality of the interior, the feel of the building. It's all mass timber. It's a beautiful building. It is like a jewel box, like Lisa said. So, so I think that was, and we got to experience that, and actually talk to a couple of employees there who were very happy with their built environment, as you would be. I mean, the thing was just stunning. Full rooftop garden with mature trees, basketball court, volleyball court, name it, it's got it. But high presence of timber, and also aesthetics, bringing back kind of like the mid-century modern aesthetics into that timber space as well. So the main living area, or the lounge living area, cafe space that you walk into has that mid-century modern furniture, the exposed timber, the carpets, all those kind of things to make it feel like home. So so yes, in an area where you're competing for occupancy, timber's got a place to play in that, undoubtedly. And the evidence is that it does it very, very well, apart from all the empirical evidence around what you're talking about before, low blood pressure, et cetera, et cetera.
And as soon as we walked in, everyone went up and touched a column,
Yeah, very tactile. I think also, I know we're talking about finished work environments, but it's worth touching on mass timber in construction, and the feedback we've had, or I've certainly heard from apprentices right through a range of level of contractor builder ability, is how lovely it is to work with timber from an acoustic, from I guess a tangible quality, and I guess in direct comparison to drilling into concrete, for example. Obviously, we acknowledge that there's a place for every material in the construction of a building, but we have heard that there are a number of contractors really enjoy working with those mass timber elements on site.
Yeah, and Excel Construction that we visited, that were constructing the Google Java buildings, they commented that the workforce on site was hugely reduced to what they would have on a traditional steel and concrete job. I think they said they had 60 people on site, which was maybe a third of what they might have had.
Yeah.
Okay.
Otherwise, I forget the stats and the numbers, but it was a big reduction.
Significantly less staff. Hey, we're heading into kind of roundup time, and I did just want to let folks know that we've got a list of the places visited and some of the firms mentioned, and we'll make sure we send out the URLs or attach it with the recording. The recording will go into the resources section of the website. We'll make sure people who attend get those show notes. We have got a couple of rounding out aspects to do, and the main burning question I've got for Daiman is where's the next tour? Daiman, is there any promo you want to pop in there before we talk about the next Industry Insights webinar?
Yeah, look, I think just before that, I think Lisa would join me in saying that without question and exception, everybody we visited was extremely hospitable, friendly, welcoming. So we had a great time, and we were really showing the red carpet everywhere we went, which was fantastic. And that's something which made this trip even better. And any hints for going to the US is this is from Harriet, is take Whitaker's chocolate, because it goes down very, very well. And I had like 15 kilograms of the stuff in my bag, which I was worried about, but it was really, really good. So look, Nick, there will be a next trip. I caught up with Hamish on Friday, and there's no sense in just doing one. There's such energy and interest from the people who went on this tour to go and do a second one, never mind people who weren't on the trip who want to go and do one. So look, the criteria is, for me, is we've got to go a place in which the things that we learn can be applied back, or we can sort of see some travel back. And there has to be bookended by a conference that makes sense to go to. If someone's going to invest the time and money to go, we want to make it extremely valuable. This was not a junket. We were in, there was no time to, at least you can probably vouch for that.
We were on the bus at 7 a.m. and off the bus at 7 p.m. or later.
Yeah.
It was ridiculous because, like, anyone who knows me personally, the idea of me organising an itinerary like that and getting away with it is ridiculous. And like Carly just laughed at all that, but I managed to do it. We were all on time. So to cut a long story short, it's probably going to be something like off to Vienna and working west to Switzerland and picking up a bunch of mass timber, social housing, manufacturing and robotics companies. Or it could be London and Ireland. Jerry, who's from Integra, was over recently. He's suggesting that Ireland and New Zealand have a lot in common, so that could be an itinerary. So yeah, we might put out a poll and gauge some interest.
Any of Southern Europe or Northern Britain heading up into Scotland with the Construction Scotland Innovation Centre area would be great, or then our called BEST, BEST, Built Environment System Transformation. Hey,
Nice.
just a couple of housekeeping things to round us out, because I know we have hit time. For those who have not had enough Daiman Otto today, Daiman is host of a number of podcast episodes that are currently on Spotify that the New Zealand Institute of Building brings to you. That's called Tall Stories, Tales from the Built Environment. And they are stories about a young rising star and an older wise head talking about career journeys. So just 25 minutes, really great for a commute. So I totally recommend those. We have also opened registrations for our next month Industry Insights, which is with Te Whatu Order, and it's about their procurement strategy, their asset management strategy. I'm sure anyone who's interested in business development in the construction sector will be very interested to tune into that. So I just want to very, very warmly thank you both. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Daiman. Thanks for imparting some of your tips and tricks and learnings from your recent tour in March. And for everybody else for joining us, thank you for joining us today on your busy day, and we'll see you next time. I'm Pamela Bell from the Institute of Building. Ka kite anō. Thank you.
Thank you.